Hola, hola mi gente, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here today, I am XO Joe, and today I'm gonna go into some unexpected reads. These are books that I did not expect to love as much as I did, and now I'm here to recommend them and sing its praises. For those who are returning, I am so happy to have you back, and I'm very excited to continue my unexpected series. Here we go. Per usual on this channel, we're gonna have a drink, mix it. Okay, so this video will feature a YA horror, a really creepy retelling, and a literary fiction. All three of these are actually super new to me. I've never tried horror and I've never tried YA horror, and literary fiction is not something I typically get into, but I have had three recommendations and I'm gonna mention one of them because I've actually read that one. I really enjoyed all three of these books and I think you will too. So the first book I want to get into that I don't think enough people talk about is actually Horrid. Horrid is a young adult horror story, and by the cover itself you can tell it's actually really creepy. It has some spooky, eerie vibes, and it was so freaking good. It legitimately creeped me out, and I don't get easily creeped out by books, but this one literally gave me goosebumps. I was so freaked out by it. The whole thing was just a very eerie vibe. So I initially picked up this book because I went to a local used bookstore and I found it for $8. It's in great condition. It has a beautiful cover, and obviously that's what drew me in. The book focuses on a mother-daughter, Jane and Ruth, who are super close. They're very tight-knit. Jane loses her father, and unfortunately for Ruth and Jane, he left them completely broke. In the book, they're living in LA and they have to go back to Maine because that's where Ruth has her childhood home that she inherited from her now deceased mother. And because they don't have the funds to stay in LA, they decide to go back, and there's just no way they can make it in LA. And honestly, can't blame them. California is a whole other beast. Ruth, however, never wanted to go back there. There are a lot of secrets that, as you read, Jane starts to reveal that she doesn't really know that much about her mother, which I found really creepy because that's your parent. So you would think you would know more, but you know, parents have a whole life before us, apparently, and there are a lot of stories untold in this book. However, Jane doesn't really know why Ruth is very hesitant, especially because the house is huge and gorgeous and Jane loves her room, but right away the house is very creepy. There's this rose garden that has been there forever, and Ruth doesn't know how it could possibly still be alive because her mom has long been deceased, and it just doesn't make sense that these roses would continue growing. And if you know anything about gardening, roses are actually very high maintenance. They take a lot of work. You can't just abandon them and they're naturally gorgeous like President Snow's rose garden. That's exactly the way Jane describes this place to be, just very luscious. Jane keeps thinking that there's someone in the house because of all these lights that get turned on, or like a shadow that she sees. And that theme continues throughout the book. Jane is seeing things or hearing things, seeing these shadows, hearing footsteps, thinking there's someone in the house, pianos starting to play, rooms unlocking and locking even after Ruth purposely lock them. It just gets really creepy. I feel like the reason this book was so eerie is because you don't really know if it's actually paranormal, if there's a mental health issue, because Jane does hint at mental health issues running in her family, or if it's her grief and lack of sleep because she hasn't been sleeping because she's so sad, and all of these changes are difficult. So you don't know as a reader what the truth is. I really enjoyed this book because we don't have a dumb MC in this story. Oftentimes I'll watch horror or I'll watch a really intense scene play out, and for me the MC's actions just legitimately don't make sense. If you're really scared of someone and then you decide to follow them in the next scene, it just doesn't make sense. But in this case, Jane and Ruth are actually so close, and every time Jane has a strange experience that she decides to share with her mom, or in this one scene where it legitimately seemed like there was an intruder in the house, Ruth believes her, and they take actions to actually call the cops and leave the house and not return for a while. There's actual support for our Jane. Even if nothing comes out of it or they can't find anything for whatever reason, Ruth still stands by her side and believes her and is very supportive. And I just really love that. And I also love the fact that Jane questions herself. As she's going through these strange experiences, she does ask herself, I don't think I'm sleeping enough, or well, the house is very old. And my mom said that oftentimes these sound sounds are sounds of a house settling. So I'm just not used to a quiet neighborhood because LA was so much louder and busier. There are a lot of things that Jane goes to first before automatically thinking I'm being haunted by a ghost, and I really enjoy that element. This book is often described as Gilmore Girls but make it horror because Jane and Ruth are so close, like Lorelai and Rory, and you can definitely see their bond in this book. Not only do we have a supportive mother, but we actually have really supportive friends as well. Jane is pretty likable and she's a solid friend, so she ends up making really good friends in this really small neighborhood, and they're actually legitimate. It's not like she just moved in and she's automatically this hated new girl for no reason, which a lot of books like to play out. She is actually welcomed by a small group of friends, and when she encounters this bully who seems to hate her for some unknown reason, it seems like everyone knows the reason except her, and her friends actually stand up to her. And since this is such a small town, all of these members are somehow related, whether they're cousins or just long-term friends, and this bully is cousins of one of her best friends. Even so, her best friend backs her up because she knows that her cousin is very rude and can be a huge bully. So again, I like that element that everyone's not just automatically blaming Jen, like, well, it's your fault you got kicked or something like that. They actually back her up, or if there's a fight or physical assault that happens, her friends are quick to say, well, you were probably defending yourself because we know this person has a bad reputation. So again, I just really like that because it's not making the plot unnecessarily complicated or unnecessarily dramatic. I like that Jane has a solid group of friends. She starts working at this little cafe where there's a really cute boy. There really isn't a lot of romance, and as much as I wanted more to happen between her and Will, it's really not necessary to the story, and I think it's just my brain wired for YA to have some sort of love interest that develops. So you definitely sense the slow, steady spark there and the interest, but it's, again, that's not what the author is focusing on, so we don't really get a lot of it. And by the end of the book, like, I didn't mind that. Some of the creepy things that Jane experiences is actually true. An example would be people throwing rocks at her windows, her room being ransacked. There are legitimate people that she sees and that later her mom also recognizes that tried to harass or break in the house because they thought it was still abandoned, because again, it's a small town and no one has lived there for a very long time, and it's called the creep house. So again, that's another element. Like, we don't know if these things are people messing with her, paranormal, grief, mental health. Like, there's just so many elements throughout this book that weaves where it feels like, okay, at one time it's this, the other time it's that, but the overall creepiness and paranormal like experiences she has in this house, we don't know what it actually is even by the end of the book. It's very unclear. Now in this book, she's actually a fan of books herself. She really loves to read books and eat the pages. That's not something we do on this channel. It's a coping mechanism for Jane where she's just overwhelmed. She'll take a page from a book and start eating it, and it developed when she was really young, when she just has these really huge outbursts of anger. She learns to control it by her senior year, but when she has these extreme overwhelm of emotions and of anger, that's the only way to pacify her and make her feel like she's okay and steady. Some of the top books she loves are actually mystery books, and you get foreshadowing when she tells Will that there's this certain trope in mysteries where everyone except the main character knows the actual mystery or truth of what's happening, and that's literally what the book ends up doing as well, where everyone actually knows the real history of her family. She doesn't. They actually know what happened with Ruth in her past as a young kid, and they also know what happened in that house to make it creepy and people keep away from it. She starts to see hints of a family member that used to live there that is no longer there and was really young when they passed away, and she starts making these connections that it's her aunt and that her mom had a sister she never told her about. So she starts following this trail. She finally starts confronting people when her mom won't give her more information on this long lost aunt. She starts questioning her friends who eventually give her the truth. Throughout this whole story, I felt so so creeped out in that house. It gave me Haunting of Hill House vibes, which I think is really high praise because I have seen a lot of books try the whole mom has a secret and we're gonna reveal those secrets in a house. I don't know what's going on in our world right now. That trope and execution is very popular, but oftentimes I've seen it fail, but this one actually did a really good job of making everything feel so creepy and uncomfortable. Since she doesn't know what's actually going on, we don't either, and since she's an MC who actually questions what's going on, so do we. So it makes it even creepier because we don't have any concrete answers. And the ending was just so shocking. I had no idea what I read by the end of the story, and I actually needed a couple of days to process, like, did I like this? Or did I not like this? What just happened? I was just so shocked by the end, but after a few days I realized, like, no, I really liked it. If it's YA horror, it definitely creeped me out. It definitely scared me. It left me mouth open, shocked. I couldn't believe that was just the end of it. I'm not gonna spoil the rest. I definitely recommend you try it and let me know what you think of this freaky ending. Sip. The second book I 100% recommend, and I actually checked it out from my library. Shout out to Libby. And that is A Man Called Ove. This book is literary fiction. I had never heard about this author before or this book in general. It focuses on Ove, a really grumpy old man who's very set in his ways. He always talks about having principles, sees the world like black and white. He doesn't agree with our current generation, especially men in white collars who feel like they can do whatever they want and you can't fight them. In the beginning, again, you get the stereotypical grumpy man. He has this routine where he wakes up at 6 a.m. and looks around his neighborhood and complexes, and he's such a rule follower and he gets so upset and so worked up when people do not follow these rules. This book definitely has some trigger warnings: unaliving oneself, losing a baby, grief, and overall the theme of death. Right in the beginning, Ove talks about doing things for his wife, or how the house is set up in this or that way for his wife, or how his wife leaves X, Y, and Z around the house, but you never see said wife. So right away you have this feeling that she's no longer there. This is confirmed early on in the book. His wife Sonia had passed away pretty recently, and Ove just doesn't see any reason to live without her. He's so deep in his grief that he has a plan to join her, if you know what I mean. We do see him attempt in this book, but before he can fully act on his plan, there's a young couple that moves in with a couple of kids that completely interrupt his daily routine and his life in general. It's such a funny and heartwarming dynamic to see. This couple has a husband who's not really the most handy guy. His house skills and all of that are really awful, which Ove definitely comments on the new male generation not being able to actually do basic things around the house. And his wife is just so loving and so fierce and pregnant with her third kiddo, and Ove and her become really close friends actually, because according to him, she's not a complete idiot, which is one of the highest compliments you can get from Ove. This book, I can't give away too much or I'm gonna end up just spoiling everything, but you do get to find out how Ove got to be kind of grumpy or upset with this world. You see his backstory on how he lost his mom really early on, and how he lost his dad when he was only 16, how he met Sonia, how Sonia completely changed his life, because you lose your parents at 16, you definitely don't feel like the world is fair, you definitely feel alone and abandoned, and so Sonia changes so much for him. And while Ove is more logical and more black and white, Sonia loves people, she's a teacher, she's so empathetic, she loves art and books and all of this stuff. And Ove often mentions how even her friends question, why do you love him? Like, why are you paired with him? He's just so grumpy and quiet. And Ove even questions this himself, but Sonia is very clear that men like him just don't exist anymore, who are sturdy and right and honest. You get to see the real heart between Sonia and Ove. You get to see Ove go through this grief and actually find joy in living again and in community. It makes you think about age, about love, about grief, especially about community. It had me laughing very hard, and that's something I didn't expect expect. It was like one chapter I was just really sad because we were going into Ove's darkest places, but because he's not this emotional character, he just kind of lays out the cards of like, well, this is what my life was like. And as a reader, you feel so empathetic, but it's not like he talks about it in this flowery or emotional way. And then when you get to the other parts where Ove is just so grumpy with the world, you can't help but laugh at the interactions because you can tell he's actually a really good guy. He's all about helping his community. The ending completely had me in tears. There were so many beautiful lines in this book. I read it through my Kindle, so you can actually see other people who have read it before you and like what they've highlighted, and some of the most highlighted lines were absolutely stunning. So I definitely put this on my wish list. I want a physical copy because I want to go back and highlight those lines as well. It was just such a beautiful book. This book was also recently adapted into a movie starring our beloved Tom Hanks, and he did such an amazing job. The movie is actually called A Man Called Ove, and they changed a lot of things around. So in the book, Ove is from Sweden, and in the movie it's set in the US, I guess just for those cultural references, and so we understand a little bit what Ove was trying to say in the book. Since I had just finished reading the book and then 2 weeks later the movie came out, I was so excited to see it on screen, and I honestly was pretty disappointed by it. It was definitely not a favorite book to movie adaptation of mine. I felt like it had so much missing, so much of the heart of the book. For example, Sonia and Ove, we don't really fully see their love story and why that was so important and how much Sonia impacted Ove's life. And because Ove isn't a reflective person, we actually get to see who he really is by Sonia commenting on the rights and wrongs that Ove has made throughout his life. And so you don't really get that in the movie either. There was also more as to why he fell out with his best friend, and in the movie you don't get that at all. Zero comment on why he actually fell out with him. In the movie it really just talks about them falling out because of huge betrayal in the home association, but in the book, by the end of it, so like so deep into the book, you get to realize why they actually fell out. And for me, it really moved me to see why Ove was so upset with his best friend. I just didn't see that coming at all. I definitely recommend you read the book before you go see the movie, or if you really want to enjoy the movie, then watch the movie and then read the book, you know, so that you can enjoy both. But the cast was certainly wonderful. I just felt like so much themes and the heart of the story were just missing in the pace of the movie and in the script. And my last unexpected read is actually A House of Salt and Sorrows. I can't believe it took me forever to read this book. Again, I went to a used bookstore and I found it for like $11. So I was like, for sure, it's time for me to read this. Let me pick it up and go. A little disclaimer. So this book is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. That is not a story I have ever read. So I've never read the original, and I have never read any of the other retellings or remakes of that story. When I looked at the reviews of this book, those who have never read 12 Dancing Princesses really love this and rated it super high, like me. Those who have read the original and some really amazing retellings rated this a little lower, but really the lowest I've seen is like 3 stars of people who made it very clear. Since I've read the original and I've read really incredible retellings, this just didn't do it for me, but it's still pretty good. And then again, people who have never and really enjoyed it rated it that 4 or 5 stars and said, well, I never have, this was my first, it was amazing. And after reading this, I definitely want to read the original 12 Dancing Princesses because this was so good. In this book, there are 12 sisters, and we follow Anna Lee, who's one of the, I think she was like the 3rd or 4th born. Forget right now because I read this a few months ago. We follow Anna Lee, who quickly lets us know that they've actually lost a lot of their sisters, and they've had funerals back to back for years. And this book begins in the most recent death. And in her house, they follow a tradition of the people of the salt because they live by the ocean, and so they follow customs that are not of the mainland, and that's wearing dark colors or wearing black for a very, very long time, and you slowly fade out into grays, lighter colors until you get back to color. But because there have been back-to-back deaths of her sisters because of accidents or incidents, they've been wearing black and in grief and mourning forever. It's been years with them just wearing black and losing sister. This all happened also after losing their mother. Her dad is remarried to a younger woman, Morella, and they don't really like her. And in the middle of their funeral, she announces that she's pregnant and fully expects it to be a boy, and just announces it in the middle of all this grief. And of course that rubs all the sisters the wrong way because they just lost a sister. So for her to bring up, but it's okay because I'm gonna have a newborn, and this time I'm gonna give him a son because he has all daughters, it's just really bad. So right from the get-go, I was also like, this mom is sus. I don't like her. I don't know what game she's playing. And since she's from the mainland, she has these misconceptions where she thinks if she has a son, they'll inherit the fortune of the Duke, which is quickly shot down by the father as well when he tells Morella he will never inherit this fortune. It goes to Camille, and if it doesn't go to Camille, it'll go down the line of all my daughters. And he still has, I believe, like 8 daughters. So Morella, you can clearly see she's really bothered by this. And that's what made me really suspicious of her right from the beginning, because I was like, you want an heir, you thought your son would be the heir, and now you're really upset that he won't be the heir, and you're looking at all of these daughters that are slowly dying one by one. But she did really want to push toward them socializing, since they've been in mourning for so freaking long. They haven't socialized or gone to balls or whatever, and so she really wants them to get back out, and she convinced the father to let them. Annalie is the only one who's really upset because she doesn't feel right just moving on from her sister's death, and so she still wears really dark colors, but the rest of her sisters are really pushing her to not be rude toward Morella, which is very ironic because Camille hated that the most, and she's the one that's like the most on board with getting prettier clothes and gowns and everything. And so they really push her to accept Morella's gifts of a whole new wardrobe, of wearing color, of going to balls, of meeting suitors. She does a little bit, but it's not really something that she wants to do. Later on in this story, we encounter Fisher, who's a childhood friend of Annalise, and Annalie had a huge crush on him when she was young, and he's an employee of her father. Of course, this makes things difficult because since he is an employee and he's a laborer, it just doesn't seem like they would socially fit. And Camille has also had her eye on him for a while as well, so there is a little bit of rivalry. You can tell right from the bat, like, Fisher is interested in Annalie, but he also doesn't make it very obvious, doesn't really say much about it. He does play a key role in this because he introduces them to a secret door that can take them to any other place where they don't have to go by boat or take a really long journey instantly and go to the most amazing balls at night ever. But he just heard it's a myth, he heard it's a legend, he's never really believed it, but the sisters decide to go anyway, and thus begins the story of the 12 dancing princesses, right? Sneaking out, going to these grand balls, dancing all night, going home early in the morning, waking up almost in the afternoon, and no one questions it right away because it's not like the staff can just question the daughters of the Duke, and the Duke is busy traveling, and Morella is really struggling with her pregnancy. She's in bed rest the whole time. The only time they start getting questioned is when their recently bought and super expensive shoes wear down super fast, and the dad is wondering why they're going through so many shoes so freaking fast, and it's obviously because they're literally dancing all night. Annalie also runs into 2 mysterious strangers throughout this book. One of them in town who's very handsome, who I immediately ship, but I was also very suspicious of, and another at the ball who's very creepy. She doesn't even feel him coming. He plays a whole other role in the book. I personally did not find this a creepy book. A lot of people say that they found this super creepy and didn't feel like they could sleep at night because a lot of things start coming out again in the manor, in the house. There's just a lot that Annalie starts to see, and she starts to question, did her sisters actually die by accident? Is there something else playing here? Why is she seeing her dead sisters in the house? She starts to go a little mad. We don't really know the true story up until the end. The last 15-20% of the book was really creepy, and it was so action-packed. I was just shocked by the twists and turns. I was so sad by the end, but I was also so excited by some turn of events. So again, if you're easily scared, I think this book will creep you out, because that's the main thing I've heard from people on Bookstagram who have read this or on Goodreads, is that this really creeped them out and kept them up at night. I just thought it was really interesting. I really enjoyed Annalie. Morella was like whiplash. Like one second I was like, well, she seems normal. The other second I'm like, well, she could be normal, but just a secretly evil stepmom, and like what's actually going on this island. I was so curious about the dark, mysterious characters in this book. I wish we knew more about them sooner, but you understand why you can't have all of that information when you get to the end. And to top it off, this book actually has a sequel, and I'm very excited for that sequel. I read the premise. It looks so promising. I will not talk about that because I don't want to spoil that for you. And if I tell you what's going on in the premise, then you're gonna know what happened at the end of this book. Definitely recommend this retelling. It's really great, and I think you're really gonna enjoy that action-packed ending and also all the twists and turns at the end. What a little mixed bag. We had horror, a retelling, and also the literary fiction on here. If you enjoyed this video and you can't wait to see more lists with a bunch of mixed genres, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It helps out a lot. Let me know if you pick up any of these books or if you've already read some of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!